best diversity, and it also offers us higher data rate, right, through the spatial multiplexing. That means I am sending multiple independent data on multiple transmit antennas, right? And theory shows that the capacity increases with the bandwidth and minimum of NRNT. And now, okay, we can get these two. Can we get both? The answer is no. There is a trade-off, and that is shown by Zhang and Say in 2003. That is called diversity multiplexing trade-off, or DMT. The diversity is the rate of fall of probability of error curve, or the slope of the probability of error curve in a log-log representation, and a maximum of NTNR can be achieved. And this maximum of NTNR can be achieved only when the spatial multiplexing gain is 0. Right? This is the maximum that I can get. As soon as I start sending more data rate, my diversity reduces. And my diversity comes to 0 when I'm sending at maximum possible data rate, which is minimum of NRNT or M, N in this particular graph. Right? So there is a nice trade-off in this. You can decide whether you want to send a more reliable information, which is here, right? Highest diversity order, or you want to have a highest transmission or data rate for the user. So what will I do? If I am close to the base station can figure out my SNR is good. So it will switch the mode to this. If I am far away at the cell edge, it will know I am far away, so it will switch to this. So there are codes available at each operating point, right? And depending on my spatial multiplexing gain, which is called as layers, number of layers in 3GPP, depending on number of layers I'm using, I'm going to choose a different type of coding for each user. Okay, and that is a diversity multiplexing trade-off. And there is also another thing related to the data rate, which is basically the constellation size, what MCS I'm going to use. And in fact, that also plays a role in this three independent parameters, and that is again studied in 2009. And that trade-off, basically all the three, diversity, multiplexing rate, and multiplexing rate and the rate, data rate, which is the MCS. So all these trade-offs are well studied, and now this is theoretical bounds, and there are codes which are already constructed for each and every operating point of these trade-offs, and so that gives rise to various coding schemes that we can find in literature. So the spatial coding scheme for diversity is known as space-time block codes, or space-time frequency codes, or space-time trailing codes. These are the three codes which basically provides us the best possible diversity, and it does allow trade-off between rate and diversity. You can actually do that nice trade-off with the different coding schemes. And spatial multiplexing for rate, which basically provides higher data rate. Here also you can decide on what data rate you want to use. For example, if I have 8 transmit antennas, typically in the best case I can transmit 8 parallel data chains if I have 8 transmit antennas at the transmitter as well as receiver, right? Let us say the mobile has only 4 transmit antennas. In the case, at least I can send 4 independent signals, streams or layers, right? So that layer selection is done by the base station depending on the channel conditions, right? So that is spatial multiplexing scheme, otherwise also known as beamforming. The beamforming for various users. Now, given the spatial multiplexing, I have 8 antennas, and let's say there are 2 users with 4 antennas each. So now the question is, how do I split the data rate across these 2 users? Can I simultaneously transmit to both? The answer is yes, and that is called multi-user MIMO. And again, that is one of the key features introduced in 5G standard, as well as the Wi-Fi 6 as well as the previous generation AC, 11 AC. Now, so if you look at the 5G standard today, it supports all these codes. It supports diversity codes, it supports beamforming for single user, it also supports beamforming for multiple users. In effect, we can have high spectral efficiency when you want, very high reliable transmission when you want, as well as very high data rate when you want. So depending on the type of services the telecom company is providing, or depending on the needs, something like URLLC or EMBP, depending on whatever the services needed, the standard is capable of catering to all of it. And that is the beauty of 5G. Now, what is this coding that we are all talking about is just a very quick mathematical model. Y is the received signal at the base station, let's say. Whatever I'm talking about, the MIMO coding, it is applicable in both uplink and downlink transmission, which is base station to mobile as well as mobile to base station. But typically I talk about the downlink only, because whatever we are doing in the downlink is equally applicable on the uplink, right? So if the base station or the mobile has the receive antenna NR, and channel has matrix is NR cross NT, and X is the user data that I want to transmit, and I have to kind of do some massaging of those information before it gets into the channel, and that is what is the P matrix, which is pre-coding matrix. We'll see some details later. Okay, and N is of course observation noise or the receiver noise. So now, okay, single user beamforming. These are all a bit technical, and if you are not following it, it's okay. You can always, there are enough literature on tutorial papers. Other, you can send me a mail. I can give you those references. So one way to do it is basically you take the right singular vectors of the channel matrix and use as the precoding matrix P, and you can show that mathematically that you are able to get independent data channels at the receiver if you pre-multiply the received signal with the U Hermitian, which is a left singular eigenvector. So the key point here is we are using the left and right singular vectors of channel matrix H. That means I'm using V at the transmitter and U at the receiver. However, the channel matrix has to be made known at both places. Then only this is possible, right? And there are some shortcuts for doing that. And how does the transmitter know the channel? That is by the feedback from the receiver. In general, the mobile always keeps measuring the channel conditions, channel matrix information, as well as the precoding matrix is P, and the rank. It basically tells how many significant singular values are there. RI and PMI are well-known abbreviations in 3GPP world, and the user or the mobile estimates RI and PMI and then sends to the base station so that it can make an informed decision, or it can make a proper beamforming. And this is another scheme. It's called opportunistic beamforming, where let us say the receiver or the mobile has only one transmit antenna, sorry, one receive antenna, and the base station has more transmit antennas. In that case, it can pick a channel which is the highest strength, or the norm of the channel is the highest, and then transmit along with that. And we can also show that it has the sum capacity is higher, right? And we can also do some kind of power control and to have an optimal or lowest power on an average. That is another scheme. The most powerful or the highest data rate scheme is the multi-user spatial beamforming, where there are k users, and we can actually, sorry, there are k users, but we choose m users among them and do a m beams to each of those users and do some kind of superposition coding. The best part here is that we have to do successive interference cancellation, similar to what Anindya talked about on the ATSC receiver. And this is a much tougher design problem, optimization problem. And the another important key thing is that all the K channel matrices has to be made known at the base station to make this make this decision. And this is one of the popular algorithms called block diagonalization method. In case you are interested, you can go and look at this paper. Actually, sorry, I forgot to put the reference. You can send me an email, I'll send it to you. And the idea is basically you want to minimize the interference to other users. Whenever I'm trying to receive, I'm trying to transmit a beam to user PJ, I have to make sure that the PK is all chosen such that HA PK goes to zero. That means the interference at other users are zero. And this year we have to do it for all users. For every user J, you have to make this decision. So all the PKs are decided jointly to make this happen. So that's a very quick overview about the MIMO technology. Now let's look at what is beamforming means. We are all talking about beamforming. Let's take a transmitter, right? I have a signal X of t and I have say n antennas. So instead of sending same X of t in all of them, I kind of apply some kind of phase shift among various transmit antennas and then I transmit. So you can call this vector, which captures all this phase information, as array vector, or you can call it array weights. So now by doing this phasing, I'm getting an advantage. What is that? Basically, if I choose these weights like this, a theta, then the beam or the main signal energy gets focused towards an angle theta with respect to the broadside of the antenna. Okay, we'll see some plot here. So if I do a 2D plot of the U is azimuth angle and V is elevation angle. And since I'm using just a one-dimensional array, I'm going to get beams which is identical on the elevation, but on the azimuth side, which is the broad side, I'm going to see shaping. That means now if I use all equal weights, all 1, 1, 1, 1, I'm going to have maximum energy at the 0-degree angle, right? And if I use the steering vector here like this, like a theta, then I'm going to see this main beam getting shifted to the theta angle wherever I want it. So now how does it help? In a MIMO or in a wireless channel, if I know the direction of the user, right, then I can focus my beam towards that user. That is the whole idea. So now at the same thing on the receiver side, I can do the reverse path where I apply weights in the various received signal and sum them up to get the signal. If I use equal weights, again my beam is going to look like this. I'm going to receive at with the maximum gain towards the broad side 0 degrees angle and less and less from the other directions. See, in one way, I am not listening to these directions. That means I have selective listening. So this is like a sector antenna, right? I am only focusing onto my sector. Like in a 3-sector cell, I focus on my sector only. This gives two things. One, I get an array gain and I guess less interference. So both are advantage. Now I can choose these ways either to maximize signal from my desired user or minimize the interference from the other users, or we can try to trade off both. And that is a whole design problem of choosing these right set of weights to pick the right signal. And that is what being done in this theory, what we talked about. So this is complicated theory is basically doing that. It is choosing the antenna weight such that I pick the user only in the desired direction, and at the same time I also put a null or I have less interference towards the other users. And that is what this complicated theory is telling us. And this is an intuitive explanation of what happens. Now, another, now from this intuition, how do we go to the theory? of beam forming, right? So this is the received signal y of t, which I can for a single from single direction at theta, right? So this is a user at theta angle. I am receiving a signal like this. If there are multiple transmissions or different directions, I get a sum of all those signals, which I can represent in a sum of product of vectors, right? Sorry, sum of scaled vectors. And in a compact notation, I can represent this all A theta I as a matrix A, where the columns of A is nothing but A theta I, and this xit again put as a column vector, and I get the received noise. So the received signal y is nothing but a vector which is nothing but a sum of or weighted sum of these array vector or array manifold, right? In mathematical term, if I represent y as a vector in a vector space, this lies in the range space or a column space of A matrix, and that is what we use in our design problem. So there is a couple of misunderstanding in the beamforming. The notion of direction or beam shape is valid only in line of sight channels. That means this whatever the beam shape I am getting is only if it is on a free space without any hindrance or reflections. The moment I introduce multipath or multiple reflections, this shape is going to be a weird shape. You can't even imagine what it is, right? So, but it is good for our thinking, just a visualization that, okay, there is a user at, say, sector 1, I'm focusing my energy there. But precisely, you cannot focus at um, a degree precision or half a degree precision to that user. That's not possible in a multipath channel, right? And second thing is the multipath channel, the array pattern seen by the base station for a given user is much more complicated than this A theta formula. This A theta formula is well and good, nice in a free space, but in a multipath channel, there will be a complicated array vector for each user, right? So, and then the third thing is the array vector or the user array vector lies in the range space of matrix A, and that is the silver line that we have. Is even though the channel vector or array pattern is going to be complicated, everything is captured in this matrix A. Okay, if you learn this matrix A, you got it. And in a way, what is this matrix A is about is it is somewhat related to the H matrix that what we have seen, right? So there is a user data which gets transmitted through this matrix A, and I am receiving. So this matrix A is somewhat related to the matrix H that we saw in the first MIMO case. And that is the silver line here. This user data is completely characterized by this channel matrix H, or in this case A, right? So what is A? A, it is nothing but a k-dimensional subspace in an n-dimensional vector space, where n is the number of transmit and receive antennas. Okay. So if I transmit on k orthogonal vectors, then I can actually cover all the users in the coverage area. That is also important. So I don't have to really measure each and every a theta vector for each and every user, because that's going to be impossible, because the channel itself keeps changing. So what all that I have to do is it's all abstracted out. This whole A matrix is abstracted out in the H matrix. And if I pick k orthogonal vectors in the H matrix, then I'm done. Right? And that is what we are proving it here. So this whatever I mentioned is kind of demonstrated. I want to draw your attention on the left top curve. This is a beam pattern. How does it look like? When I apply 13 different weights, each designed with a different theta. For example, the purple curve at the center is for 0 degree theta. I use this A theta formula here. I use this A theta formula in a uniform linear array with 10 transmit antennas, or receive antennas, either way it is symmetrical. And this is how the beam shifts when I change the theta, right? And as you can see, there's a huge overlap in these beam patterns. If I shift by 10 degrees, it is shifted by so much 10 degrees, the main beam, but there's an overlap. That is because the beam width is wider here. How does the beam width change? It is a function of number of antennas. If I have a long array, the beam width is narrow. That means I have more gain. If I have a shorter array, I have a broader beam. That's what it means. Now, instead of using this theoretical formula, if I use just DFT vectors as the weights, right? The beam pattern suddenly changes like this. If you look at these two, still I am able to span the entire region, whatever I want. I can scan it. However, now these are our orthogonal vectors. You can see that. Wherever there is a max, the other is a min. So each vector is orthogonal to each other. Right? That means if I am receiving from angle 0, the guys coming in the neighboring beams will not interfere with me. So that's the beauty about orthogonal weight vector. Now there is one more set of orthogonal weight vector I can derive from the singular vectors of the channel matrix, and that's completely weird, right? Because this is derived from a random channel matrix. This is a deterministic DFT matrix. And now every channel instant, this is going to be weird. However, if when I use 10 weight vectors, I am covering all the users without any coverage hole. That is the best part. Okay, so let's move on quick to MIMO. There is no MIMO discussion or 5G discussion without these three applications. And already other speakers spoken about it, but I want to only highlight these three terms. EMBBB means very high data rate. URLLC means a very high reliable system. And MMTC is a massive number of devices attached to your base station. Okay. Let us see how MIMO is able to cater to all the three applications. So as an evolution of 3GPP MIMO standards, initially started with fixed 8 code books. These fixed code books are decided by huge amount of simulation done to come up with a fixed set of precoding matrices. This P matrix, what we discussed earlier, right? This P matrix or given a library or a cookbook, you can only pick set of matrices from that, and that's what given in release 8, release 10, and slowly this improved. Basically, the number of transmit antennas support improved from 8, 16, 32, and so on. And not only the number of transmit antennas increased, also the number of layers also increased. I think the previous release was 4 layers, now up to 8 layers we can go. Okay, and that's how the entire standard development happened. And another key development in 5G is FR2, and FR2 basically gave us more bandwidth at 28 gigahertz, but it came up with its own bag of problems, right? As the path loss is a function of or inversely proportional to the frequency, carrier frequency square, we have 20 dB loss, extra loss for the same distance. So we have more bandwidth, but less distance. So how do we solve this problem? So this is how it is solved. In FR1, you can see massive MIMO is a must because I want to achieve high data rate. Up to 8 spatial layers can be done. Okay. And FR again is a must in FR1 for achieving high reliability because of URL LLC requirement, right? Ultra reliability requirement. And again in FR1, massive MIMO is a requirement for achieving high connection density because I want to do multi-user MIMO transmissions, right? Which is a MMTC requirement as well as multi-user MIMO for spectral efficiency requirement. In FR2, even if you don't have massive MIMO in FR1, in FR2 there is no way you can live without it. You cannot have decent coverage of the cell unless you have extra 20 dB transmit power, which is again too much to ask for, right? So how do we get this 20 dB gain? Use 10 antennas at least, 10x more antennas, because the beamforming gain is roughly can be given this by this relation, right? And for large number of antennas, but yeah, the next problem is as I increase number of antennas, I need to have so many RF chains, which is not affordable, which is not economical, and thermally cooling it probably we need something like a liquid nitrogen sitting next to the base station, right? Um, so that is again not practical. So now this how we solve is through the hybrid beamforming. We'll check, we see what is hybrid beamforming next. So these are the three types of beamforming. One is digital baseband beamforming, where every antenna has a RF chain and baseband chain, where I can compute these precoding matrices, whatever from the matrix H, and then apply that here digitally. So I have maximum flexibility, but maximum complexity, right? That's not practical in FR2. If I come to the analog beamformer, which is I have only one baseband chain, but I have strictly analog beamform. The problem is I can steer only one beam at a time. Here I can have multiple beams. Here I can only have one beam. That means I can only talk to one user at a time. So the compromise is between these two. You have fewer RF chains and some analog beamforming for each of those chains, right? So that way, with the different analog beamforming chains, I can afford to have multiple beams, and at the same time, with the multiple RF chains, I can have MIMO or multi-user MIMO multiplexing as well. So now let's see this solve the theory how the 5G achieves that, right? So in a striking contrast between LTE and 5G is that LTE was designed for single analog beam, which kind of covers the entire sector, and but here it's only do a partial cell coverage. So the standard itself is designed for multiple steerable analog beams or multiple beams simultaneously, right? And the digital beamforming is applied on the top of the analog beamforming. That is for the fine tuning of the beams. So again, for illustrative purpose, I'm drawing beam as a nice lobe, but in general, imagine this beam is weird. It is not a nice looking one like this. So now there are three phases in the beam management. One, first I have to acquire the right beam. I should know the right beam at the base station. I should know the right beam at the mobile. That is step number one. Step number two, I should track them. I should have the not only the analog beam, which is broad beam, I should also have a fine beam for the digital beam. And not only that, I should track it. When the user moves, I should track it. Right? And then the third one is, and also in P2, you also do the data transmission. And the third one is when there's something like beam failure. Suddenly you lose the beam connection. How do you recover? Let's look at each one of these. Say initial beam acquisition. Let us say the mobile has two beams and antenna. The various base station have other beams. So first it listens to the base station one in all the three beams, which is single beam, and the other one. And then let's say it finds okay the base station two in this beam two for the UE is stronger, so it locks to that. Okay, how does the mobile can lock to that, but how does the base station knows that you're locked to that particular beam? That is achieved by the next step, which is a RAX transmission, which is a random access request. When I send a random access request and the base station can decode it correctly, that means we are at the right beam. Okay, so how does base station now solve this problem? It keeps listening to multiple beams in a time division multiplexed manner, right? So that's what happens in the PBCH channel, which is the broadcast channel, which is the initial acquisition for the mobile. It is repeated multiple times. The PBCH can be repeated up to 16 in FR1 and 64 in FR2. Okay, that means you can have 16 analog beams in the FR1 and 64 analog beams in FR2. And each repetition is meant to be transmitted with the different analog beams or along the 16 orthogonal directions which we talked about earlier, or 64 orthogonal directions. Okay. Now the UE locks to the beam in which it decodes the PBCH successfully. And how it makes this base station know is that this is the catch. For every SSB transmission or a particular beam, there is an associated PRACH window which the mobile can use. So what the base station will make sure is that if I use beam 1 weight for SSB1, it will use the same weight for PRACH1. So that way it is guaranteed that the mobile gets the, or it can listen to the mobile in the same beam. When the UE is successful in sending the PRACH, then GNB, the base station knows what is the correct beam for that particular user. See, now the beam becomes specific for a user rather than beam for a specific area or a sector. So that's why it is a very fine beam adjustment that can be done in 5G. So this is a process. First, the base station sends multiple SS bus or PBCH. Then you decide which beam is right. Then it sends a RACH resources. Then it sends a RACH request. And once this is received correctly, they are both of them got the right beam numbers. Next, after acquisition, now we have to get the fine beam adjustment, which is done by sending user-specific beam-specific channel training sequences. CSIRS is channel-specific channel state information reference signal. Again, for every SS block, this is sent, and mobile can estimate the fine channel matrix, H matrix it can estimate. Now from that, you can do the MIMO transmissions and so on. Then the further fine adjustments can be done through the mobile will report the beam strength across multiple analog beams, and then the base station kind of does a weighted sum of these beams to refine the beam further. Okay, there's much more advanced scheme. The kind of similar thing is also used for wideband applications. Something like when you have a very high bandwidth in FR2, like 400 megahertz, the same analog beam may not be, or the same digital beam may not be catering to the user across frequencies. So we choose different beams and then weigh them separately to get the fine beam focus for across frequencies. So similar to the downlink procedure, the base station also learns the uplink beam from the mobile. That is something done through the sounding reference signal. The beams are sent, the SRS is repeated across multiple beams, and the base station learns that and remembers that. So now the beam failure recovery, let us say there's a beam failure happened, and then it is quickly detected through the SS blocks. And then there are some quick recovery mechanisms using a specific PRAC channel where it can quickly send the request without contention window. Okay. And yeah, again, there are schemes available for control channel and data channel. I'll just skip it in the interest of time. So now the challenges. So for this is for academicians. So as a beam, I talked about nice theory of selecting, switching this beam. Now how these weights are selected is this. Basically, what I receive is the effective channel, which is nothing but the RF beamforming, baseband beamforming at the receiver as well as the transmitter. FRFB is a transmitter, WBWR is the receiver. So what I'm receiving is an effective channel. And how do I choose these matrices, WB, WR, FR, FB, is a challenge. And it is a non-convex optimization problem. And people have a lot of suboptimal designs are being published. That itself is about huge literature. So you can get a lot of details about it in the tutorial papers. So to summarize, basically, this is the layman terms. Given a desired direction vector, right? I want to transmit. How do I split it between analog beam and digital beam? That's a challenge. An example, say if I use DFT weights as the SS bus in the SS bus transmission, how do I convert it to the analog and digital weights? Moreover, the analog weights have limited precision. I can have only 5-bit phase shifters or 6-bit phase shifters available practically. So that limits my precision. And they are imperfect. I mean, when I say 30 degrees, it may be 31 degrees. Or when I say 10 degrees, it may be 9 degrees, right? It can be plus or minus few degrees off. And that is imperfect. How do I account for it? Digital beam weights can be computed only on effective channels. See, the H matrix is not directly measurable. It only through this beam formers I'm measuring. So I can only measure this H tilde, which is effective channel. So how do I measure? How do I construct beam weights with only the effective channel? How multiple beams can be transmitted using single analog beam? Okay. How do we do more than one analog beam? These are all the practical challenges. And summarize the whole talk, the technology is matured. MIMO technology is matured enough to be in mainstream products. In fact, every mobile that we carry today has MIMO technology. And still there are enough unsolved problems for both practitioners as well as engineers as well as the theoreticians. And this nice combination, massive MIMO with the hybrid beamforming, which offers the right complexity and flexibility. But the challenge lies in the design of weights. And the next challenging will be the multi-user MIMO. And that's it's very nascent stage, but however, it is made into the standards, both at the Wi-Fi 6 as well as 5G. And the next level of complication is the multi-base station beamforming, which is called coordinated multi-station beamforming, COMP. And that is today is possible because we can synchronize multiple base stations up to few nanoseconds today, right? Which was missing earlier. Now it is state-of-the-art time synchronization allows us to do that synchronization. So we can now think about doing multi-base station beamforming to a single user or multiple users simultaneously. So this basically leads to cell-free wireless technology where there are no cells. We just keep deploying multiple base stations and they keep adaptively shifting their beams and according to the load and requirement. And that is the holy grail that one is after. And the cloud RAN architecture, which is basically makes this possible. I can randomly or on the fly, I can move resources. I can reduce the antennas in one place, increase the antennas in another place, reduce the power here, reduce the number of layers there. So it's a huge optimization problem, which is all computed at the cloud RAN, right? Basically, the multiple base stations will disappear. They will be replaced with just only the antenna heads called remote radio heads, RRUs or RUs, and the entire computation is done at the cloud RAN. So I can do a massive optimization through machine learning, and because humanly it's not possible to write a code to do that. So through machine learning, we can actually do this, which is in reality today, and people have demonstrated this technology. So that's the conclusion. And thanks for your attention. And any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, very much. This is a great learning and excellent presentation. Simplified mathematics, complicated mathematics simplified. So thank you very much. Thank you a lot. So we have few questions we can take and discuss some of them.
Yes, sir.
right? Yeah. So the first question came in is which part in the MIMO system model is the data front end? I don't understand. If you understand this question, you
Can you
can.
repeat the question, sir?
Which part in the MIMO system model is the data front end?
Data front end.
Mm,
I'm just guessing they are talking about this. Basically, this is the user data. There are yes spatial streams, and that's where the user data is given. Basically, it may be your mobile video or it can be anything. Your browsing, whatever. That's all converted to finally bits. Those bits are converted into this yes spatial streams, and this yes spatial streams are conveyed from the base station to this mobile end. This is the data front end.
okay, okay. Other question is yes, is CSI required and what is the cost complexity?
As you see that if there are NR cross NT antennas, theoretically we need NT cross NR information, but there are a lot of compression technologies available today, and these pre-coding matrices are pre-computed. You don't have to sweat it out. The standard has done it for you. You simply implement the standard and then it's done. However, if you want to invent a new code book, by all means, there is enough wealth of literature available, and enough problems are unsolved.
Okay, that's great. If you steer a pencil beam for an user with high mobility, what would be the maximum speed of steering possible for FR1 and FR2?
I will answer this part in two parts. FR1, in general, the beams are wider in nature because of the fact that one, the path loss is not so bad. We can use fewer number of antennas. So the beams are broader in general, and so the concept of pencil beam need not arise there. And since remember it's a multipath channel, so whatever you are imagining as a pencil beam is not actually pencil. It is some random pattern like this. So if I go back to those curve, it will be one of these weird patterns, right? And the good thing about the multipath channel or MIMO channel is that as long as you are transmitting in all the k orthogonal directions, wherever the user goes, you still catch him. You are not missing him. Okay. However, if the channel is changing very fast, let's say you are going in a bullet train, right? Then what I will do is I'll just simply go to maximum diversity. I will not do any beamform. That's all.
Oh, okay.
For FR2, that will be the case. We mostly will not do beamforming much. Mostly diversity use case. It will be a line of sight communication where you can just directly send the beam.
Okay, that's great. There is a comment and question. Thanks for excellent talk. Can you please share some references for number of antenna elements in a panel versus beam width requirement?
Can you repeat the question, sir?
Can you please share some references for number of antenna elements in a panel versus beam width requirement? Number of
Okay.
antenna in the panel and beam width.
Okay. Yeah. Again, I repeat. The beam width is only makes sense for a line of sight communication or free space communication. In multipath communication, that beam width really doesn't matter. So what beam width you can calculate here in this random beam. For here I can calculate. For here I can calculate. But for this I cannot. And what matters is the number of antennas is sufficient enough, which is only function of how many spatial channels that you want to support, how many users simultaneously you want to support, and how many spatial streams that you want to support. If you tell me these numbers, then I can tell you how many antennas is required. There's a theory already, I mean, people have established this very well. And it's
Okay,
all
okay,
available in textbooks. You don't have to go to papers.
Okay, that's great. Referring to Shannon theorem, practically what is the maximum number of antennas which gives significant improvement in the capacity?
Yeah, as I mentioned, it is min of NRNT, right? So you choose what you want. So that if I want 10 factor increase, tenfold increase in capacity, I have to make sure that the minimum of the transmit receive antenna has to be 10. If I want 100, I put 100. If I want 1000, I put 1000.
Okay. What is the type of polarization to be considered in this case?
Good question. I'm not tested about polarization diversity. Yeah, actually, we do both polarization in practice. When I say an antenna, antenna contains both horizontal as well as vertical polarization. You can say it's equivalently two antennas. If you can afford to have that many number of RF chains. However, in practice, what we do is we take both polarization, we do a RF addition and then bring it in. That's how we do. But we use both. In practice, we use both.
Okay. Is there any tool for simulation for MIMO and CSI? MATLAB?
MATLAB is available, all the tools. You can take a system view from Agilent or a MATLAB, and NI has a software. Almost every tool has a 5G toolbox today.
Yeah. Are code books available both for downlink and uplink in 5G for massive MIMO or defined only for one direction?
No, it is defined for both directions.
Okay, so there is one last question we might take, and that is just a moment. I have to come into this chart. Yeah. So what is the key factor to decide which pre-coding technique should be used? Do we need to go with only one pre-coding method for uplink or downlink, or it matters differently for downlink and uplink?
So that brings me to this curve. So you choose your operating point, whether I want maximum diversity or maximum data rate, maximum reliability or highest data rate. You choose an operating point which is theoretical. We cannot go beyond these points. Right? These are the bounds. You choose an operating point and there is a code available for that. There is a pre-coding matrix available for that.
Okay. Is it possible to carry out inter-cell coordination for beam steering?
Yes, that's what I talked about, this multi-user MIMO coding. So this multi-user MIMO coding need not be from one single base station. It can be across multiple base stations. And that's what I talked about in the end about a cell-free system where the multiple base stations are sending data to same user simultaneously like this.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, why do you think that hybrid beam forming is good?
Hybrid beamforming. Okay.
Yeah.
Hybrid beamforming gives you the advantage of less complexity, but at the same time, you haven't lost all the flexibility. Where is that? Yeah. Right. So in purely digital beamforming, it's too complex, not too many receive chains, antennas, so on. Antennas I can afford, but not receive chains. Only analog beamforming, I can do only one beam. Here I can have the trade-off between these two, combination of those two. So here I can have simultaneous beams at the same time affordable hardware.
Okay, that's great. And one last comment. I think our Kishore Sahab wants to go to very future, and he's very futuristic, saying that is there any possibility of using massive MIMO for extremely low frequency, and what could be the power transmission at that frequency?
That depends on what is the distance he's talking about of transmission. Low frequencies advantage is they travel further. You don't need more than one antenna typically. Example, you take FM station, just one antenna is like covering like hundreds of kilometers.
But FM is still higher. He is talking about extremely low.
Extremely low. The problem is you will not even have space for one antenna. Forget about multiple antennas.
Okay. So that's all. I think that is okay. There are more questions. I think people can reach out.
Professor Naveen, may I ask one question?
Sure, sir.
Okay.
Welcome.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks to Dr. Ganeshan. It's a great, deep contribution and very powerful presentation. And in this series, with Professor Naveen's help, 6 different days we have been able to cover this 5G aspect. So again, thanks to the whole team and good contributions. I have 2 short questions. One is I'm still struggling in my mind, so I'm asking it loud. That DMR diagram that you showed, diversity multiplexing rate, so we understood that. And you also have earlier said, it is giving that spatial diversity, but it is increasing capacity. Now, the capacity theoretical limit will be there, and that's the paper, seminal paper. But can I trade off between this diversity gain and I compromise the performance and help in achieving capacity realization bit more? Not the fundamental capacity, that will be determined by the overall equations, but capacity realization. So I'm a little struggling between diversity performance, capacity realization, and the DMR part. So this is, I need a clarification. And let me put the second question also, that these beam that are there different way, even with all this MIMO, we are still struggling in the 5G deployment, that people have to turn around or they have to walk a little bit to get the right signal. So it's still not doing the way we expect it to be doing. So is there further role that MIMO could play in this direction? So these are 2 questions. Either you can answer now or later, but I just thought I'll put this.
Dr. Naveen, I have time to answer these questions now?
Sure. Enough time.
Sir, Alok sir, basically, if we look at this operating point where the diversity gain is minimum and spatial multiplexing gain is high, which is min of Mn. So this is the point where I am very close to the base station. Okay, I would choose this operating point where my SNR is very high. But if I want high reliability, I will go to the other extreme. Here, my multiplexing gain is 0. What does that mean is, when I keep increasing SNR, my probability of error curves goes down and down at the rate of SNR power minus Mn. Okay, so this is the operating point that you are asking about. I have sacrificed my rate, but I have given the best possible reliable link, given the Mn number of antennas. And if I want a better rate, which is better than this, only other knob I have is SNR. I keep increasing transmit power. Okay. And typically what we do, we are transmit power limited. So we use this point at cell edge or between 2 cells where there's interference. And this is the point where it's very close to the base station. I hope I answered this question. That makes it clear to you?
Part well. I think I will talk about it separately on the capacity part. We said
Now,
8.
coming to the second part, what you asked, it's a good thing because we still engineers have jobs to do.
That is correct.
And that's a lighter side, but eventually what happened is this FR2 is a beast. So what happened is, even though we are fixing these pre-coding matrices, the channel is so diverse across continents, cities, places. So the environment plays a big role in coming up with or tuning these parameters on how to choose these pre-coding matrices. It is not an easy thing to do. And there are certain things which are spelled out in the standard. There are certain things which are left open to the implementation. And that's where the problem comes. The implementation chosen by each and every vendor has a flavor and that has to mature over time. In fact, I remember one story in Motorola. We are all working on GSM base stations and we were all happy with the performance across multiple sites and everything was hanky dory. So we went and installed it in Australia. Boom, nothing worked. In Australia, there's vast open space where there's a very huge long multipath. It comes from a very far away mountain, which we have never occurred in US, right? So the environment factors will will dictate some of the tuning parameters. And for 5G, we just started. It will take a long time to make the tuning.
Okay, that's great. Alok sir, hope is clear.
Thank you very much and for all the contributions. Great.
Okay. Okay. Sir, one small question is there for massive multi-user MIMO. Is minimum 250? I don't know what he means by 250 and what is minimum 250. Is the number of user he wants to say something like? Can you guess this? For massive.
Can you read this? I'm not looking at the text. Okay, let me look at the text.
Okay.
I'm not I'm reading it. Yeah, maybe you can read it. Read the text once again. I'll see how do I get to the text. Okay, let me go back to the. It's not showing me the text. Show me the chat window.
No, it is in question and answer. No, actually, the question is not complete. So I wanted, Madan sir, are you there? We can unmute and you can ask a question if you wish.
Okay, I got the question answer. The last one.
Yeah, no, for massive multi-user MIMO is minimum 250.
Okay, I'm seeing that. For massive memo is minimum. There is no such requirement, or addressing 250 users is simultaneously not an easy thing. I guess what he is asking is how many devices per sector that one can support. But I think it is in the order of thousands, not hundreds. So we can potentially support thousands of users. However, not all through only MIMO technology. It is also through frequency and time resource allocation.
Okay.
This is Subhash here. I think perhaps the question is what is the array antenna size for TX and RX in a multi-user MIMO? Is it 250 by 250? I think something like that.
Okay. That is what he's asking. Okay, so I have seen typical deployments today. Maybe Alok sir can correct me. 64 by 64 in FR2, people have done it. Sorry, 8 by 8 array. Sorry, 64 total. And yeah, there is also 16 by 16, 256 also people have done it. But the minimum probably I would say for FR2 will be around 64, 8 by 8.
Okay, I think that's all. One small question: can we use machine learning for pre-coding metrics? I think yes. Why not?
Why not? Machine learning is doing everything, including finding the time for milking the cow. Why not this? So.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Any other question from any audience? Any other question? You can definitely raise. Otherwise, we can wind up. Sorry, he's a no, not panelist. Madan sir, you can also ask. I told you, right? If you are listening, I told you that I can unmute if you wish, and you can ask question. Are you okay to ask? I can unmute you. Just give me a moment. Subhash sir, can you bring Madan Pandey? Just a moment, sir. I'll unmute you.
Someone is asking for email ID. My email ID is gana@ieee.org.
Sir, just a moment. Just wait for a minute. Give him answer. He is raising hand. Okay. So I'll make him finalist. Now he can ask. Madan Pandey, sir, you are now finalist. Please unmute yourself and ask a question.
I think before unmuting, there is a button to press to connect the audio.
Yeah, audio connection, he has to do it first. Yeah.
Oh, so we have to. Subhash sir, can you? Okay, let me see to this
You
Pandey.
only
Okay.
can do it. You cannot do anything. Madan
Oh,
sir
he
only.
can do. No?
At the bottom you will find a call button. Kindly press that. Then it will connect you to the speaker microphone.
His hand is raised for long time, so I thought, okay.
Yeah, I guess he is not unable. He is not able to connect to the audio. Looks like.
Yeah, if
Okay.
you can send email, I'll reply to that. I have just typed my email address. And I
Okay.
forgot to put it in the slides. Yeah, I should have.
No problem. Okay, sir. So with this, thank you very much, and thank to everyone participant. It was a great learning with all of you, and hope you enjoyed our session. So thank you very much. Thank you to all the speakers for excellent work and excellent presentation. Thanks our entire Comsoc team as well. And good night. Let us see sometimes once again. Look for Comsoc website, see some updates you will find. So we have a lot of activities. If you are not IEEE Comsoc member, please become Comsoc member at 50% discount. Thank you very much. Have a nice night. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Naveen, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And yeah, I would like to thank all the speakers and as well as our chair for giving us opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Bye. All the best.
Done.